Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The dining room smelled the same as it always had: garlic, sofrito, and the particular brand of tension my family had been marinating in for 30 years. I had driven 4 hours from Chicago. I had brought wine, a good bottle, not showy, just good. I had told myself the visit would be different this time. Neutral. Civil. I was 32 years old. I ran a property management company with 11 buildings in my portfolio, and I had learned, slowly at significant personal cost, that I could not change my family. I could only manage my exposure to them. I set the wine on the table. My mother, Elena Torres, did not acknowledge it. "You look thin," she said, which in our family meant, "You look like you're not taking care of yourself," which reflects poorly on us. "I'm fine, Mom." My father, Rogelio, was already seated, already halfway through his food, already wearing the expression he wore at family dinners, the one that said he was present in body only, that the real Rogelio had checked out sometime around 1997 and left this placeholder version to nod and shrug and defer to whatever my mother decided. My younger sister, Camila, was there too, with her husband Marco, who had the particular gift of laughing at everything my mother said as though she were a beloved stand-up comedian rather than a 61-year-old woman who had never once been told no. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin. "So," my mother said, passing the rice without offering it to me first, "we made some decisions while you were away. I should tell you about the apartment building before I tell you what she said next. The building at 4417 North Meridian is a 6-unit walk-up in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. It is not glamorous. It was not glamorous when I found it, 6 years ago, through a foreclosure listing that most investors had passed over because the roof needed work and 2 of the units had outstanding code violations. I was 26. I had been working at a commercial real estate firm for 3 years, entry-level, then analyst, then associate, saving every dollar I didn't absolutely need, eating lunch at my desk, skipping the after-work drinks my colleagues treated as mandatory. I had $47,000 in savings. The building was listed at $410,000. My mentor at the firm, a 60-year-old Korean-American woman named Dorothy Shin, who had built a 12-property portfolio starting from a single duplex in Evanston, looked at the listing with me one Thursday afternoon and said, "The bones are good. The violations are fixable. The neighborhood is changing. If you're going to do it before someone smarter than you notices." I took out a conventional investment loan. I negotiated the seller down to $388,000. I spent 8 months fixing the violations myself on weekends, hiring contractors for what I genuinely couldn't do, learning what I could. By 2019, all 6 units were occupied and cash flowing. In 2020, my parents' landlord sold the building they'd been renting in for 14 years. They had 60 days to vacate. My mother called me frantic, which was the only emotional register she used for genuine emergencies. Everything else was performed drama, but this was real. They were looking at apartments in Cicero, in Berwyn, places that were fine but far from the neighborhood they knew, far from the church my mother had attended for 30 years, far from the grocery store where the owner knew my father's name. I had a vacancy at 4417. I didn't tell them I owned the building. I told them I knew the landlord. I told them I could put in a good word, get them a below-market rate, $1,100 a month for a 2-bedroom, in a market where comparable units were going for $1,450. My mother asked twice why the rate was so low. I said the landlord owed me a favor. She accepted this without further question, because it benefited her, and she had never been particularly curious about things that benefited her. They moved in April 2020. I had Meridian Property Partners, my management company, which I had incorporated in 2019, listed as the building owner in all correspondence. I handled their maintenance requests through the firm's ticketing system. I collected their rent through the same online portal as every other tenant. My name appeared nowhere in anything they touched. I had reasons for the distance. I want to be precise about this. They were not petty reasons, though some people might call them that. They were architectural. I had built a life that functioned because I had placed a certain amount of structural separation between what I did and who my family believed me to be. My mother had spent my entire childhood telling me, in various creative formulations, that I was not particularly capable. Not cruel. She would have been offended by the word cruel. She was realistic. She was preparing me for disappointment. She told me not to study architecture because I wasn't artistic enough. She told me not to pursue the real estate analyst position because I wasn't business-minded. She told me, at my college graduation, that she hoped I had a backup plan. I had learned, by 23, that her belief in my limitations was not something I could argue away. It was structural, like load-bearing walls. You didn't fight load-bearing walls. You built around them. So, I built around her. I filed the owner occupancy clause in 2021, a provision in the lease requiring the listed tenants to occupy the unit as their primary residence and not sublet any portion of it without written owner approval. Standard language. I had it in every lease in the building. I did not anticipate that my mother would rent out my old bedroom. "We converted your room," she said, serving herself more rice. "There's a young man from the university renting it. His name is Daniel. He's very respectful." I set down my fork. Not dramatically. Not the way you'd set something down in a movie, with a clatter and a meaningful silence. I just set it down quietly and looked at her. "You sublet part of the unit," I said. "We rented your room," she said, emphasizing the distinction as though it were important. "You haven't used it in 3 years. You never come home. We needed the extra income. Your father's hours were cut." My father shrugged. "It's our house. We decide." "Marco found him," Camila added helpfully, gesturing at her husband, who nodded as though he had done something worth nodding about. "He pays $650 a month," my mother continued. "Cash, first of the month. He's clean, he's quiet, he's studying engineering. We did everything right." I picked up my wine glass. I took a measured sip. Through the window above the kitchen sink, I could see the courtyard of the building, the one I had repaved in 2022, the one with the iron bench I'd installed because Dorothy had told me good outdoor spaces improved tenant retention. I had chosen that bench from a catalog at 10:30 on a Tuesday night, sitting alone at my kitchen table in the apartment I owned in Wicker Park, eating takeout pho, and listening to a podcast about interest rate cycles. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I glanced at the screen discreetly. A notification from the Meridian Partners Management app. A message flagged by my property coordinator, a sharp 28-year-old named Jalen who ran day-to-day operations and had the unsettling habit of being right about almost everything. Ms. Torres received a complaint from Unit 3 about noise levels and unfamiliar foot traffic in Unit 1. Did some digging. Looks like Unit may first have an unauthorized occupant. Ran a quick check against the lease terms. They're in violation of the owner occupancy clause. Want me to send a formal notice? Or are you handling this one personally? I put my phone face down on the table. "How long has he been there?" I asked. "For months," my mother said. "He's practically family now." "Mom." I kept my voice even. "You can't sublet part of a rental unit without the landlord's written approval. It's in your lease." She looked at me the way she always looked at me when I said something she found inconvenient, with a mixture of pity and irritation, as though I had just cited a traffic law at a family barbecue. "We've been renting apartments since before you were born," she said. "I think we know how it works." "The landlord doesn't know," my father said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of comfortable logic. The landlord doesn't know. Therefore, there's no problem. "Actually," I said, "I think the landlord knows." My mother waved her hand. "If the landlord has a problem, let him call us." I looked at my phone. "Her," I said quietly. "Let her call you." I didn't end the dinner early. I want to be clear about that because it matters to understanding what kind of person I am and what kind of person my mother had always assumed I wasn't. I ate my food. I asked Camila about her job. She was a dental hygienist, recently promoted to office manager, a detail she mentioned twice with a sideways look at me that was meant to establish a kind of scoreboard. I congratulated her, and I meant it. I asked Marco about his contracting business, and he talked for 11 minutes about a bathroom remodel in Oak Park, and I listened genuinely because I find construction interesting and because Marco, whatever his flaws, actually knew his trade. My mother served flan for dessert. She made excellent flan. I had 2 servings. After dinner, I helped clear the table. My mother and I stood at the sink together, and for a moment, just one, it was like when I was 12 and we would do dishes after Sunday dinner, and she would tell me about the town in Oaxaca where she grew up, about the market where her mother sold embroidered cloth, about the way the light fell on the Zocalo in the late afternoon. She had been a different kind of person in those stories. Or maybe I had been a different kind of listener. Stay the night, she said, her back to me, rinsing a plate. I can't. Early meeting tomorrow. She made a sound. Not quite a sigh, not quite a dismissal. Somewhere between the two. You're always busy, she said. You always have a meeting. I do, I said. I have a company to run. She turned and looked at me, and there was something in her face that I recognized. Not the performed drama, not the critical assessment, but something older and more genuine. Something that might have been, in a different family, a conversation worth having. What company? She said. You've never explained what you actually do. Real estate, I said. You manage buildings for someone? Something like that. She dried her hands on the dish towel and looked at me for a moment longer than usual. Then she folded the towel neatly over the oven handle the way she had always done, the same precise fold she'd used my entire life, and walked back to the living room where my father was watching television. I stood at the sink for a moment. Then I took out my phone and texted Jalen. Don't send anything yet. I'll handle it. The next 3 weeks were the quietest part of the story, and I think they were also the most important. I want to tell you about Dorothy first because she is part of why any of this happened the way it did. Dorothy Shin had been my mentor for 6 years by then. She was the person who had looked at a 26-year-old analyst with $47,000 and a foreclosure listing and said, do it, without hedging. She was the person who had been in the room in 2019 when I incorporated Meridian Partners, who had sent me a handwritten note that said, you built something. Remember that it was hard. The day you forget it was hard is the day you start making sloppy decisions. She was also the person who, when I called her 2 days after the family dinner, said, you knew this was going to happen eventually. I didn't think they'd sublet the unit. You put them in your building and didn't tell them you owned it. You created a situation where they had every incentive to treat the space like it was entirely theirs and no information to suggest otherwise. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm saying cause and effect are still in operation. I know. What do you want the outcome to be? That was the question I'd been sitting with. Not what should I do, that was straightforward legally. The owner occupancy clause was in the lease. Daniel, the engineering student, was an unauthorized occupant. I had grounds to issue a formal notice, begin cure proceedings, and, if uncured, initiate eviction. Standard process. But the lease was in my parents' name. And my parents didn't know the building was mine. I don't know yet, I told Dorothy. Well, she said, you've got about 2 weeks before Jalen's report becomes a formal compliance issue. After that, it's not a discretionary call anymore. You have to document the violation for liability reasons. So decide before then. I spent those 2 weeks doing what I always did when I needed to think. I worked. I closed a deal on a new 7-unit property in Logan Square. I had lunch with Jalen at the taqueria near the office, and we went over Q3 numbers, which were strong. I went to a 3-hour continuing education seminar on municipal zoning amendments that was genuinely useful and also attended by approximately 40 people who all looked like they needed sleep. I ran. I had taken up distance running 2 years earlier, not for any particular reason except that it required nothing of me except forward motion and time, and I found the simplicity of it restorative. I ran 6 miles along the lakefront on a Tuesday morning when the temperature was 41 degrees and the sky was the flat gray-white of Chicago in October, and I thought about my mother's face at the sink, about the way she'd asked what company, about 32 years of her believing I was approximately capable of approximately average things. I thought about what it would cost to tell her the truth. Not legally. Not professionally. I mean the thing that sits in your chest when you imagine a moment before it happens, the specific weight of it. The way some truths, once spoken, change the architecture of a relationship permanently. And not always in the direction you hoped. I had imagined telling her 100 times. In my imagination, it always went one of 2 ways. In the first version, she looked at me with something like wonder and said, I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't know. In the second version, She looked at me and found a way to make it about herself. Found the angle by which my success became her grievance, my secrecy her injury, my building her humiliation. I knew which version was more likely. I thought about Daniel, the engineering student, who had no idea he was living inside a family drama that had been 20 years in the making, who paid $650 a month in cash, and was probably just trying to finish his degree. On the 15th day, I called Jalen. "Prepare the formal notice," I said. "Owner occupancy violation, Unit 1. But don't send it yet. I'm going to deliver it in person." Jalen was quiet for exactly 1 second. "In person? It's a family situation. Another beat. Okay, you want me there?" I thought about it. "No. But I want the documentation complete. Everything, the lease, the clause, the complaint record, the date the violation was reported." "Done," he said. "And Miss Torres?" "Yeah. For what it's worth, I've seen you handle hard things clean. You'll handle this one clean too." I hadn't expected that. I sat with it for a moment, the way you sit with something someone says that lands differently than you thought it would. "Thanks, Jalen," I said. I drove back to Pilsen on a Saturday morning in late October. I parked on the street half a block from the building and sat in my car for a few minutes. The leaves on the trees along Meridian had gone amber and rust, the kind of color that Chicago does for about 3 weeks before the wind strips everything bare. A woman I recognized from Unit 4, an older Guatemalan woman named Rosa, who had lived in the building since before I bought it and who made tamales at Christmas that she distributed to every tenant, was sweeping her front steps. She waved at me without knowing who I was, the way people wave at cars that are parked too long outside their building. I got out. I had a folder with me, Meridian Partners letterhead, the notice of lease violation, and 3 supporting documents. I had dressed intentionally. Dark slacks, a clean white button-down, my good coat. Not to impress. To be taken seriously. I knocked on Unit 1's door. My mother answered. She was wearing her Saturday clothes, track pants, the oversized sweatshirt from Camila's quinceañera that she'd been wearing around the house since 2008. She looked at me, then at the folder, then back at me, with the specific expression she reserved for things that confused her. "You didn't call," she said. "I know. Can I come in?" She stepped back. The apartment smelled like coffee and the pine cleaner she'd used since I was a child. It was tidy. My mother kept an immaculate home. Always had, and I noticed, with a small pull of feeling I didn't examine too closely, that she had hung new curtains in the living room. Yellow. They looked good against the morning light. My father was at the kitchen table with his newspaper. He looked up, looked at the folder. "What's that? I need to talk to you both about something. Is Daniel here?" My mother frowned. "He's at the library. He studies Saturdays." "Why?" "Okay." I sat down at the kitchen table, across from my father. My mother stood near the counter, her arms crossed, not defensive, just her natural posture when she didn't know what was happening. "I need to tell you something that I should have told you 4 years ago. I've been trying to find the right time and there isn't one, so I'm just going to say it. Sophia." My father's voice had a note of caution in it, not alarm, just the particular tone he used when he sensed something was coming that would require him to actually be present. "I own this building," I said. The kitchen was quiet. My mother uncrossed her arms. "What?" she said. 4417 North Meridian. "I own it. I've owned it since 2018. Meridian Property Partners, that's my company. I'm the landlord." I opened the folder and set the property deed on the table, facing them. It had my name on it in standard 12-point font. Sophia Elena Torres, sole owner of record. When your landlord sold your building in 2020 and you needed somewhere to go, I had a vacancy here. I put you in at below market rent. I should have told you then. I didn't. That's on me. My father looked at the deed. He looked at it for a long time without saying anything. My mother said, "You're our landlord." "Yes." "This whole time?" "Yes." She sat down, slowly, as if her legs had decided the situation without her. She sat in the chair next to my father and looked at the deed. "Why didn't you tell us?" she said, and her voice was not the voice she used for performed emotion. It was her real voice. The kitchen at midnight voice. "Because you would have changed how you treated the apartment," I said. And because honestly, Mom, I didn't think you'd believe me. Her jaw tightened. Sophia, I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's true. You've told me since I was 17 that I wasn't business-minded. You told me not to take the analyst job. You told me to have a backup plan at my college graduation. I kept my voice level. I wasn't angry, but it was old anger, the kind that had been processed and folded down into something more usable. I built something real, and I kept it separate from you, because I needed it to stay real. Because your belief in my limitations is very strong, and I have spent a long time learning not to let it touch the parts of my life that matter. The room was very quiet. My father put his hand flat on the table, not reaching for anything, just placing it there. His hands were large and work-roughened, the hands of a man who had spent 30 years in manufacturing, and I had always found them steadying in a way I couldn't entirely explain. How many buildings? He asked. 11, I said. Something moved across his face. Not the shrug, not the placeholder expression. Something real. My mother was looking at her hands. I'm not here to make you feel bad, I said. I want to be clear about that. I'm here because there's a lease issue that I have to address as the building owner, and I couldn't address it without this conversation happening first. I turned to the second page of the folder. The formal notice. You sublet part of the unit without owner approval. That's a violation of your lease. I need the subletting arrangement with Daniel to end within 30 days, or we enter a formal cure process. My mother looked up. You're evicting us.
No.
I'm notifying you of a lease violation. You have 30 days to cure it, meaning Daniel needs to vacate, or you need to get a lease amendment that formally adds him as an occupant. If you want to pursue the amendment, I'll approve it with a market rate adjustment to reflect a third occupant. That's the process I use for every tenant in this building. You're not getting special treatment in either direction. You charge us more, she said, and there was something in her voice that was looking for the betrayal in this, looking for the angle. I'd charge you what's fair, I said. What I charge everyone. My father said, what's the market rate for a third occupant? It would bring the unit to $1,300 from $1,100. That's still $150 below comparable units in the neighborhood. He nodded.
Processing.
My mother stood up. She walked to the window. The one I'd replaced in 2021 because the old frame had a draft. The one I'd chosen from a contractor's catalog at 10:30 at night. And she looked out at the courtyard. You put in that bench, she said. Not a question. Yes. I always liked that bench.
I didn't say anything.
I told Mrs. Rios, Unit 4. I told her the landlord had good taste. She turned from the window, and for just a moment her face did the thing I had imagined in version 1 of this conversation. The wonder, the recalibration. I told her that. Rosa makes good tamales, I said. Something almost like a smile crossed my mother's face. Then it passed because she was my mother, and she had never been someone who lived in small peaceful moments for long. You should have told us, she said. You had no right to keep that from us. I had every right, I said, quietly but clearly. It's my business and my property. I shared it when I was ready. We're your family. You are. And you're also my tenants. Those two things are true at the same time. She looked at me for a long moment. I held her gaze, not combatively, not to win, just steadily. The way Dorothy had taught me to hold a room when you're the one with the information and someone else wants to use their emotion as leverage. I need to think, my mother said. Okay, I said. Take the 30 days. Daniel moved out 18 days later. He found a room in a graduate housing co-op near his university through a listing I may or may not have quietly flagged for Jalen to forward to the university's off-campus housing board. He got a good room at a fair price. He left a card for my parents that said they had been kind to him. My parents chose not to pursue the amendment. My mother told me, in a phone call that lasted 22 minutes and covered 3 or 4 other topics as a kind of buffer around the main point, that they wanted to keep things simple. That they were used to how the apartment was. That adding a formal occupant was too complicated. I said I understood. I meant it. What I didn't say, what I held quietly in the part of me that had been managing this particular emotional property for a long time, was that I knew what her real objection was. The amendment would have meant acknowledging, in a legal document, that her daughter was her landlord. It would have made it official and permanent and impossible to privately reframe. She wasn't ready for that. I don't know if she ever would be. The week after Daniel moved out, I had dinner with Dorothy at a Thai restaurant in Andersonville that she had been going to for 20 years. She ordered the same thing every time, massaman curry, jasmine tea, mango sticky rice, and she always ate without looking at her phone, which I found both admirable and slightly unnerving given that she was the person who had taught me that attention was the most valuable professional asset I owned. I told her how it had gone. "Your father asked how many buildings," Dorothy said. "First thing he asked after I told them. He was proud of you." "He didn't say that. He asked how many." That's what proud fathers do when they've spent 30 years not knowing how to say the words. They ask the quantifiable version of the question. She sipped her tea. "How did it feel?" "I thought about it. Like removing a splinter," I said. "It's not painless, but there's relief in it." "And your mother?" I was quiet for a moment. "She liked the bench I put in the courtyard," I said. "She told her neighbor I had good taste." Dorothy considered this. "That's something." "It's not an apology."
No.
"But it's something." She set down her tea. "You know what I've learned after 40 years of this work? People show you who they are in the small true things. Not the big, declared moments. The small true things." She looked at me steadily. "She told her neighbor you had good taste. She didn't know it was you. That means she thought it without any reason to perform it." I sat with that for a long time. It didn't fix anything. It didn't rewrite my childhood or make the dinner table less tense or restore the 32 years of her believing in a smaller version of me than I actually was. The wound was real. It was mine. I had learned to function with it, which is not the same as being healed of it. But it was something. I'm telling you this story because people ask me sometimes, at panels at the firm's annual event, at dinners with colleagues who are curious about how a 32-year-old ended up with 11 buildings, they ask me where the drive came from. What made me start? What kept me going through the years when I was eating lunch at my desk and saying no to drinks and choosing a contractor catalog over a social life? I never know how to answer that cleanly because the honest answer is complicated. Part of it was Dorothy, who looked at a 26-year-old with $47,000 and said do it. Part of it was Jalen, who told me on the phone that he'd seen me handle hard things clean. Part of it was Rosa in Unit 4, who makes tamales at Christmas and sweeps her steps and waves at cars she doesn't recognize. But part of it, a real, structural part of it that I would be dishonest to leave out, was my mother's voice. The one that said not business-minded and have a backup plan, and this resort is above your level. I didn't build to prove her wrong. That's too clean, too tidy, too made for a movie. I built because I needed to build something she couldn't touch or see or diminish, somewhere she couldn't put her hands and reshape into evidence of my limits. I built the distance first. The buildings came from the distance. What I didn't expect, what I'm still learning to hold, is that the distance cost me something too. For years of my parents not knowing what I did. For years of Sundays where I could have said I own this building and chose not to. For years of my father's placeholder expression at the dinner table, not knowing he had anything to be present for. I don't know if I'd do it differently. I know that the bench is still in the courtyard. And my mother likes it. And she told her neighbor. And right now, on the first of every month, an automated payment of $1,100 clears from account number ending in 4471 into the Meridian Partners holding account, same as it has for 4 years. Her rent. On time. Every month. I process it like any other payment. It is not like any other payment. Some things are two things at once. That's the part they don't put in the formula.